Well, welcome councillors and staff to this committee meeting today. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land we're on here today and pay respect to their elders, both past, present and in the future. And because it's being webcast, I need to remind everyone again that all those in attendance at this meeting, that the meeting is being webcast, and that those in attendance should refrain from making any defamatory statements concerning any person, councillor or employee, and refrain from discussing those matters subject to closed council proceedings as indicated in clause 14.1 of the Code of Meeting Practice. So we have present councillors McAndrew, Goodsall, Ring and Goodwin. Do we have any apologies?
Mayor Thompson.
Thank you. Any others? Oh, sorry, Councillor Coleman, yes, very, very late today. So we have two apologies, Councillor
Smith.
Oh, Councillor Smith as well, I'm told. So we have Councillor Smith, we have Councillor Thompson and Councillor Coleman. Any other before I put it? Could I ask someone to move the apologies, please? Been moved, it's been seconded. All those in favour, all those against, declare it carried unanimously. Any declarations of interest in the business today? None. We'll move then straight away to the staff reports. The first one is the event debrief, Lithgow 2021. Who have we got? Andrew doing that.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor, Mr Chair. Our first report deals with the debrief of Lithgow 2021, a recently held event, which those that attended I think enjoyed it. It was quite successful. There are of course changes that had to be made this year to make it a COVID safe event. Mr Parry's here, our Economic Development and Destination Manager, should councillors have any questions.
So, councillors, you have the debrief there on pages 3 and 4. Any questions, comments?
If I may.
Yes, Councillor Ring.
Andrew. Look, I agree with the commentary on that the bands need to be more mainstream. The bands are a little bit out there. I was a bit surprised to have the food stalls and some of the vans in the parking area. That concerned me. The reversing of the bus was done properly and well, because I watched it. That's always a concern, but it's always a concern when you've got a bus coming in that's reversing in an area where you've got a lot of people. There was one person there. I'd rather see the bus turning area used, or the parking area used as in the past, for the bus to turn around without the need to reverse. I think there might have been this year extenuating circumstances, talking to the staff about having the food stalls not on the paddock, but I think it's something that needs to be looked at in the future. I think as a ticketed event it worked well. I caught the bus from the Workings Club as I have in the past. It worked brilliantly. Having the heating there this year was good. You know, overall, like anything, some tweaking, but overall, yeah, very good show. Credit to the staff.
Okay, any comments, Mr Muir, on the issue of the bus and the food stalls?
I might get Mr Parry to take that one.
Thanks for your comments, Councillor Ring. Very valid observation. There is a challenge managing the throughput of vehicles, including the buses, in and out of the area, and we were trying to align the green spaces to be more of a family-centric type event and moving the food trucks into the parking area. But your comments are very valid and definitely worth addressing as we move forward with the event.
Okay. Any other comments? Yes, Councillor Goodsall.
I had a bit of a spiel, Mr Parry. Well done to you and your team. It was an amazing event. It was community based, which is what I love the most. It was lots of Lithgow residents attended. And I wrote a little bit down before I actually read the debrief, which was the seating, the fire pits, the spreading out of the food vans, which I found really, really nice. A central stage, instead of having it over in front of the blast furnace, up on a stage. I love the roving artist and of course the fireworks and the lighting in the trees. I think as a timed event it was really successful, start and finish. Just no one staying back for nothing really happening. It was just short and sweet. And I disagree with the commentary around the mainstream bands. I thought the bands were authentic and a little bit different, and that was a little bit of a different event. I found it really comforting. It was really soulful music, which I connected with. Will the markets be reintroduced? The markets that were up on the hill where people could purchase? That was the question that I had, and yeah, just that it was specifically for our community, and I loved it.
Mr Powie, on the issue of the markets?
We did make advances to the broader community and previous market stall holders, including numerous food vans as well as the local sales opportunities. And the feedback was muted, to say the least, given the nature of COVID in the last year and a half or 2 years. But it's definitely something we will look at as we look to expand the event going forward from a community-centric perspective.
Thank you. Any other comments, councillors?
Only that I wasn't able to attend the event. I wasn't able to attend the event. I was out of town at the time.
Yep.
I heard good things about it. Obviously, the numbers were for COVID. Is that correct? The ticket sales were only because of COVID. Is that going to be the same for Halloween, or what's happening in relation to ticket sales and stuff like that for Halloween, or is there anything planned?
Thank you, Councillor McAndrew. Thank you, Councillor Goodwin. Halloween is a work in progress. Certainly, to make that a COVID-safe event with the logistics of the Main Street area requires some significant thought and some significant consideration. And I know Mr Powery and his team are looking into that at the moment to see how that might be able to occur in the Main Street area.
Mr Mill, through you, Deputy Mayor, what are the numbers that we can have in an outdoor event?
Councillor Goodwin, they have changed in the last month or so. It was limited to 5,000 for a regional event, but that was contingent also on what space was available, with 2 square metres per attendee. It has since changed to a maximum of 10,000 people. With the geographic area of Lithgow's Main Street, we can actually get to 15,000 because of the length and breadth of the street, but 10,000 is the maximum as it currently stands. Are we getting 10,000 to Halloween on the times that we've had Halloween? Across the 7 hours, without specific people counting mechanisms, but close to it, we were thinking we were around that 10 or 11,000 mark historically.
Thank you.
Yeah, look, I expect Councillor Goodwin that councillors will be giving a fairly full briefing as we get closer to the Halloween event, so we get a better idea exactly what. And the problem is with this COVID, it's a moving thing all the time. It depends on what's occurring at that given time when the event is on. Look, the recommendation's on page 4. Have I got someone to move the recommendation? Been moved, Councillor Ring, seconded Councillor Goodsall. Those in favour, those against, declare it carried. The next matter is Lithgow Destination Draft Marketing Strategy 2021 to 2024.
Once again, Mr Chair, this detailed report deals with the draft destination marketing strategy, which was, councillors, I understand, were given a briefing in February on the draft strategy. Since that time, it has been socialised, if you like, with our tourism membership, but also our regional marketing cooperative, which is the body which has been set up to deal with such matters. Once again, Mr Powery is the expert on this. If there's any questions, then he'll be the man to answer those. Thank you.
Any questions, councillors?
I've got a number of points I'd like to make about it.
Councillor Ring?
If I may, thank you, Councillor McAndrew. I don't support the document. I think the strategy is premature at this point. it talks about the destination management plan. My involvement with the destination management plan goes back several years when I got onto the tourism committee of the last council. It's a grossly inadequate document. The introduction, there's a lot of good sound information, but the rest is a massive wish list, which doesn't clearly articulate the roles or responsibilities for implementing. It's a perception in the community that, council's going to do everything. Well, council can't. It needs to be cut down, it needs to be tightened up, it needs to be more professional. As I said in the tourism committee when I first got on there and subsequent, it was a nice first attempt, but it needs to be cut back and made into a workable document that we can achieve and set targets for. I think this needs to be done before we move forward with the strategy. I think the strategy also needs to be developed with the management plan in conjunction with the LEAP project moving forward. I mean, the strategy is talking about increasing beds. With COVID, we've had significant decreases in visitation numbers. Apart from the obvious of international tourism dying, there's probably been a 30 to 40% going off the Destination New South Wales figures to the Blue Mountains region, of which Liftgo is still counted as a member. How many beds do we have in the LGA? I mean, these are things that I'd like to know. How many beds do we have? Are they motel beds, B&Bs? What's the preferred target number? What are the impediments to growing the accommodation market in the LGA? I can think of a few charges that we put on motels which significantly hurt that industry going in certain areas. I find the positioning statements Lithgow-centric. It doesn't really capture the greater essence of the LGA. Lithgow at one stage was its own council area, the city. 1972, late 72, amalgamated with Blackstone Shire Council. I think it's unfortunate we kept the name of Lithgow, because when you go out into the regions, the other areas, when you mention Lithgow, you've always got to add the fact that you're talking about the LGA, not just the town. There's still a lot of the angst in the community about it being Lithgow-centric. And yes, there's a strong industrial heritage in Lithgow, but it goes back to the convict period, the crossing of the mountains, the settlement at Hartley, Cox's Road, and it predates that to the Indigenous history, which is not mentioned in this the report. In its current form, I really can't support it. I think we need to be going back to the destination management plan, getting a firm hand on where we want to take it, and we need to be looking at this in terms of COVID and the impact of COVID on the tourism industry. We've got 45% of our LGA, which is national park or state forest. As far as I'm concerned, national parks have invested very little money into this community for decades. They've got a lot of money at the moment. We're not seeing a lot of it, to the best of my knowledge, being spent. The facilities we have in those parks at the moment are not up to standard. And that impacts on the people we're going to get here. I think there's a lot of work to be done. It's still a fledgling industry. But I think we need to go back to basics and get that underlying documentation right first.
Thank you, Councillor Ring. We are actually in the throes of updating the destination management plan as we speak. It's a few years since it was produced, all 450 odd pages of it, and but the bones of it are still very strong. However, it does need to be updated, and we're working with the Lithgow Regional Marketing Cooperative on getting an updated, more refined, more appropriate document that talks to the Lithgow LGA of today and our plans going forward. And a part of that will be referencing and making commentary on what the role is in terms of the marketing of the destination and its environment. So that's in tow at the moment and being drafted. Then it will go to the LRMC and then on to the members as we move forward. We have had feedback from members specifically that talk about the National Parks and State Forests and Sustainable Natural Environment Tourism directives and underpinning DNA, which we will definitely seed into that DMP because it was a little bit light on in the first version moving forward. We have reworked the core positioning statement to try and include more about the broader geographic destination the references to Walgan and Caperton Valleys and the natural wonders, because the feedback we did get from members was that it was a little too much about Lithgow, and the perception locally is still the main street of Lithgow, not the LGA, the 4,500 square kilometres. And as part of that, we also put in a geographic positioning page at the back end of the strategy to say we are not just the word and the town Lithgow, we are the broader environment. From day to stay underpinning, we are still very confident about that as the opportunity to get more people spending more time and get more of a return on investment. The inside is very clear, $70 for a day trip as opposed to $300 for an overnighter. We've got about 250 beds in Lithgow, so we haven't got a lot. We are bereft of accommodation, and we are well aware of that. But the numbers say that about 45% of our visitors are visiting friends and relatives, so they stay with the friends and family there as well. So the DMP will still talk to infrastructure and gaps in the economy going forward.
Any other comments, councillors? Councillor Goodsall?
I do. I don't, this is a bit out of my depth, I think. Other committees, I wish other councillors were here so I could hear their input, but other committees are factual. They're, the operations committee, you've got data in front of you and you can see whether you've achieved or whether you haven't achieved. Same with the finances. I don't understand. I 100% support it. I think it's a really positive step, but I don't know what I'm comparing it to or how do I know it's going to be successful? And I guess that's why you're developing it, to see that. The close proximity we are in Lithgow to everywhere. Everyone's going to come for a day. That's what I got out of it. If you can encourage people to stay, well and good. And I love that it's focusing on our endowments that we already have. Question that I did have was, what was the who are the external specialists in tourism that you've related to in this report? You had.
So we've used Kim McKay and her team from ClickX. They've won international, regional awards, and they have been the strategic agency behind the Mudgee transformation in the tourism visitor economy space over the last 5 to 7 years as well. They were actually referred to us via Destination New South Wales, Destination Outback, our local destination zone general manager.
Can I ask another question? Yeah. So how will we know, through you, Councillor McAndrew, how will we know if it's successful? How do we know if this has got real teeth to get stuck into? And what's the next step after we do endorse this?
This talks to a report that's upcoming. We are currently working with the LRMC on a digital campaign into the 3-hour drive market at the moment, and it will be based around the strategic intent and intention of this draft marketing strategy in terms of how we talk, how we position, how we deliver and market and promote the destination to potential visitors coming in. So this strategy talks about the type of imagery we use, the type of headlines, the type of wording we use, the tone and manner of that wording, and what templates or constructs we use for that advertising to try and get penetration and cut through. We are looking at a digital campaign, and there are numerous search engine optimization and click-through measures and impressions. So we can measure via the digital environment how many people see the ads, how many click through to the Lithgow Tourism website, from what locations they come to, what the demography is, are they younger or older, are they male or female, and what search terms they are using, or what ads work better than other ads along the way. So we have all of that information together and have been reporting, well, our agents reported back to that on a fairly regular basis. That's definitely information we can share with the Economic Development Committee as we further progress.
Thank you. Look, Councillor Goodwin, sorry.
You're right. The digital campaign you're talking about, is that what you're saying about Facebook and on social media? Is that the digital campaign you're looking at?
That's correct, Councillor Goodwin. So it's a combination of what's called the Google Display Network. So it's actually paid for ads. There's three types. There's a banner ad, a half page, and a rectangular ad, which are placed in certain environments. There's also paid for Facebook and Instagram ads. And there's also Google search ads that are based on key search keywords that we target along the way. And when people search for those, it's when you look at Google and the ads come up at the top. So when people are searching for, say, a Blue Mountains getaway or a night away near Sydney or a spa near Sydney or a bushwalk close to me, that's when the Google search terms come in and it directs them to our ads as well. So it's based on those 3 or 4 different mechanisms.
With that, do we compare ourselves with other LGAs like Blue Mountains and Bathurst and Mudgee? Once those ads are up, do we have a look at see how much traffic we're getting through ours compared to how much traffic Mudgee are getting through theirs and Bathurst are getting through theirs, like trying to compare apples with apples rather than, just going off what we've done, saying like that we've got 10,000 hits and then after this we've got, say, 15,000 hits. If Bathurst are doing the same and they're getting 15,000 hits, how do we know that we're actually doing the right thing? Sorry, and why just digital campaigns? Is it just to measure, or what about mainstream media as well, such as television and radio? Are we looking at doing something like that?
On your first point, Councillor Goodwin, we measure what impact our ads have in the market and also click-throughs to the Lithgow tourism website, how many people are coming in, what pages are looking at, how long they're staying along the way, as well as those impressions, the visibility of the ads and the click-through along the way from what areas. Unfortunately, we cannot compare ourselves against locations because that's their data. What we use is, and it's normally lag, but it's essentially the visitor survey data that comes from Destination New South Wales and the Australian Tourism Council, where they research the market and go out and talk to a number of data sets and say, what locations have you been to, what advertising have you seen, how long do you stay, for what reasons, but it's at a broad macro level, so we can't actually get comparison sets versus other regional locations, but we can measure the impact of our campaign, especially given the call to action is to go to our Lithgow tourism website, which promotes all of our community tourism product, our tourism members along the way.
Just before I put it then, I just want to make the point that it is a draft strategy, and this is simply a committee meeting. Before the full strategy can be adopted, it'll have to be adopted by a full meeting of council. So I would encourage all councillors to have a good look at the draft strategy. The issues raised certainly by the 3 of you, if there's issues in it, have a good look and go through it and put forward suggestions. I think that would be most appropriate. So the recommendation is really only asking about endorsing the draft strategy at this stage. So I do have a mover, seconder. Those in favour? Those against? Councillor Ring is against, so I declare it carried. The next item on the agenda is the Lithgow tourism update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Fairly self-explanatory, looking at recent tourism activity and trends and future activity relationships, of course, to previous reports. Once again, Mr. Powery can speak to any of the finer points if councillors have any questions.
You have it there in front of you, councillors. Questions, comments? Councillor Ring?
For you, Councillor McAndrew. Look, it's a good report. I've only got one question. I'd like to see the visitation figures for the VIC for the last couple of years to see the impact on COVID and see how we're trending. Just monthly figures if we've got them.
Any other comments or questions? The recommendation is on page 8. Could I ask someone to move that recommendation? Move Councillor Ring, seconded Councillor Goodsall. All those in favour? Those against, declare it carried unanimously. The next item is the Lithgow Economy Scorecard. Who wants to deal with this one?
This one is also the subject of a presentation to councillors that Mr Parry will take you through. You'll note in the report we not only tried to look at some of the metrics that we see in what we call the profile site, but also some of the more longer term work which was done by the transition working group, and trying to give councillors some knowledge and indication in that area that may assist them. And so Mr Parry just might take us through that.
Mr Parry? Okay. Can councillors see that presentation? Councillor Goodsall? Yep. Yeah. Presentation on your computer there. Oh, you've got it. Yep. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor McAndrew. The Lithgow Economic Profile website, which is available to all public and community members, uses a number of different data sets to give an understanding of the economic and industry trends across the Lithgow LGA, coming from a number of data sources which are listed there on the screen in front of you. So it's everything from census data, so that's obviously lagged based on census years, to what they call the Australian Bureau of Statistics national accounts, income, expenditure and product, which primarily comes from businesses through the Australian Business Register. There's also labour force survey data, there's ATO data, there's Centrelink information, which again talks to the unemployment numbers. There's real estate data, which talks about housing prices and take-up of both rental and houses for sale, as well as expenditure survey. So these data sets come out at different times, and about 2 weeks ago the unemployment figures were updated, so I thought it was appropriate and cognizant to bring up both that unemployment numbers, latest figures, but also to give an overview about how our economy has been tracking in the last 2 years, where we've had bushfires, the pandemic, and also the floods as well. So it's been a year. So these data sets are talking around the last 12 months to 2 years. But the working group's work was exceptional in terms of talking what our longer term issues are as a developing and transitioning economy. So there it is at a glance. I will take that as read, and I will talk to those individual scorecard acknowledgements in the next pages.
We might take questions as we go through it, Ms Power, if that's okay.
Very much.
Question, councillors, on those first 2 pages? I have one on the population. So we're saying the populations went back 0.4% in the last year. And the December 2020 unemployment rate 5.5%. Does that pick up youth unemployment, or is that complete different?
Two things, Councillor McAndrew. The one thing is this is estimated resident population, so the economic company looks at the trended or lagged figures. So if you look at the slide up at the moment, it shows that since the mid-2013-14s, our population has been baselining around 21,500 people. So it's just estimates going forward. So the population really hasn't moved at all over the last 5 to 10 years in any significant numbers. Again, the longer term challenge for that is as more people relocate or retire to Lithgow, the population gets older and children are being born, and hopefully youth are taking local jobs, you would expect an increase in population. So that hasn't been the case going forward. From an unemployment perspective, youth unemployment is part of that, but the challenge is it's based on the Centrelink data and it's very dated. I had a look, but it's still 2 years out of date, so we can't really break that out at this moment in time. It's very much in the minutiae and very hard to get those specific numbers.
Okay, any other?
So I know the unemployment rate's gone down, but I'm still concerned about the unemployment rate here in town and the youth unemployment and long-term jobs for the future. So over the last 10 years, if population has stayed the same, is it our fault that we haven't been getting jobs and people, allowing people to come to the town? I don't know what the answer is to attract people to Lithgow to stay, and if we don't have the jobs, we can't. The employment figures are going to be low.
And in that period of time, of course, we had heavy hits on both mining and power generation during that period of time of this survey.
I don't know whether it's a planning thing that we need to plan longer term or shorter term, so for jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Probably just take there is a slide further on actually that probably assists in understanding some of the longer term trends and takes us back to even pre-2014 when those unemployment figures were high. In terms of planning, I'd probably defer the discussion probably to the next item on the Lithgow Evolving Economy project, because that's a really, really important part.
Mr. Muir, Mr. Powery?
Could I just make a comment, Councillor McKenzie?
Oh, sorry, yep.
Look, I mean, this site is very useful. I've got it on my favourites on my top bar at home on the main computer. I did run a COVID-19 economic report for Lithgow City Council. It is very sobering. It's compares September 2019 to December 2020. It just shows the impact that the JobKeeper scheme did have. It had a significant impact. And without the JobKeeper team, the top three impacts were accommodation and food service, a loss of 319 jobs, manufacturing 49, retail 46. And there was a drop of roughly 6% in our gross regional products. So we have had a hit with COVID, and the information is there. And you're right, we've had the hits with the fires and some other things. But all councillors should be going to and looking at this site, because the information on there, you can drill down to nationalities where people were born, how many languages are spoken at home. It's got a wealth of information which is readily accessible.
Business numbers have been holding steady for the last 4 or 5 years, which is a good thing. Year on year, our business numbers are up by 4. So this takes into account all those businesses that have shut down, have gone outside of the Australian Business Register, and all the new ones coming on board. So population's holding steady. Business numbers are holding steady, so it's a status quo situation in terms of industry and population as it currently stands, with some ups and downs across some of the industry subsectors, but still holding at about the same level of 12 months ago and even 24 months ago. And again, showing the stability or for want of a better word, that the sameness of our environment. Local jobs are holding at about the same level as they have been doing for the last half a decade or so, just around 8,100 workers on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis.
If I could, Councillor McCann, just to clarify, my understanding is when we did the Reds, the majority of our people live and work in Lithgow. We have very few people leaving the area to work and very few people coming in. I believe that's correct.
That's correct, Councillor Ranga. It's called local community economic self-sustainability. So the more locals you have working, living and spending the money, it promotes or acknowledges a relatively self-sustained economy that's got more opportunity to manage pitfalls as the time goes past. Those areas where have 40 or 50% of the population that drive out for work, then there's an issue because they're not actually spending or working in the local environment. So they're not contributing to the local labour economy and they're not spending their discretionary spend in the local LGR as well. So very valid observation.
Yep, thank you for that. Look, although there hasn't been significant growth, that's still a very important trend, and that helps us to have a very stable economy. We just need to find the means to grow it.
So here's the quarterly unemployment figures, and it shows that Lithgow has essentially been following the national, the regional and the state trend since 2019 when the bushfires came on board and then the pandemic. But our trend is better. So our current unemployment rate is 5.9%. And you see in the last quarter to quarter reading, it's held the same. So we're actually following the standard trends at a regional, state and national level. But the latest read was actually quite good, because when we're on JobSeeker and JobKeeper, we had 24% of our workers taking up either one or the other. And so that was very sobering at the time. But looking at the baseline figures, population's holding, labour market's holding, business industry's holding, and the unemployment rate is following trends, but still sitting below the rest of the country. Total building approvals. Now, there's a anomaly in this data because it doesn't show the 2019-2020 financial year. It jumps from 2018-19 on the right-hand side of the graph as you look at it to March year to date. I've talked to Economy ID, and they said it was a data entry error and they were trying to get their back office staff to fix it, but they haven't done it, so I will circulate when we have that. But when you look at this data, and this is really important, you look at both the non-residential, the industrial and the residential DAs, we've actually been having a fairly stellar time period through our development and planning compliance team since 2015, 2016, based on the last 20 years. So this is the issue you have with census data, which shows that the population growth rate isn't moving on. But this is saying, in fact, we've got more industrial development happening and more residential development happening. And anyone who's in the know in regional New South Wales or Central West at the moment would know we're bereft of both properties for sale and rental property in Lithgow at the moment. So we have been seeing that significant movement in the last 12 to 24 months. And that's the joys of the estimated resident population. It only picks up and estimates based on the 2016 census data as well. But our development approvals have been at a good level in the last 5 years.
Any questions? Any questions? I have one, Mr. Parry. Is someone renting a home, does that go into the residential or goes into non-residential?
It doesn't fit into this data at all. This is just...
Doesn't fit into the data at all?
New residential or industrial commercial developments.
Okay. Any questions?
Has a social element also. Yeah. So if you had a question about the household mix and the like, it's a set of information that is really rich, and a series of reports can be run. It's all based upon census data, so it's It's a very, very valuable and rich source of information.
I'd like, if I could, Councillor McAndrew, I'd just like to say that these figures show we've clearly had a bit of a building boom, which has also coincided with difficulties in getting staff, retaining staff. And I think Mr Muir's team has done really well in dealing with what has been a mini boom for this council.
Let's hope it continues. Yes, Councillor Goodsall?
I've just got a question. Is this information out of that Lithgow ID?
Now, this is an important chart because it shows in the last 2 years, after our gross regional product, and your GRP is the sum of everything, your economic output, what's being made, what's being sold, what workers are being paid, how many workers have we got, what new businesses are coming in. All of the data sets get combined to give this GRP. You know, what's the macro state of our economy in the local community. So you can see that in the period from 2012 up to 2017-18, there was generally, you know, a favourable, not a great increase, but a favourable lag trend in terms of our GRP. But it is absolutely just baselined and held. And if you compare it to the years 2009, 2010 and the previous 5 or 6 years, you can see the impact of the last 24 months on our broader economy. Even though businesses are holding okay, population's okay, the labour force is holding okay, the business count's okay, our broader industry is hemorrhaging a fair bit based on the last 2 decades worth of information.
Comments or questions?
Just that obviously COVID and the fires have had a significant impact.
Yep.
Like I said, the report that I pulled for that quarter comparison showed a 6% drop in the gross regional products.
Yep. All right, the next one.
Now, this is specifically about businesses, industry and their economic output. So what are they making and what are they selling it for? What money is coming back into the economy? It shows at a baseline level there hasn't been much of a change. There's been a slight change year on year versus the financial year 2018-2019. But it's good to see that the economic output businesses are still producing. But remember, you know, our business numbers are about the same and our labour force is about the same. But it's interesting to see that mining has been up versus a year ago by the sum total of just over $36 million in terms of economic output. The relativity is that's an increase as a year ago. If you go back to the previous 4 or 5 years, the output out of mining used to sit around the 1.7 to 1.8 billion mark, and it's sitting about the 1 billion mark at the moment. Manufacturing's also seen some increases year on year, as is wholesale trade. So they were the major step-ups along the way. There's been some ups and downs across the other industry subsectors, but year on year our economic output is up a tad, which is a positive thing. Shows the industry is still producing.
So what is it telling me about the healthcare and social assistance? Because everyone's saying that the growth in healthcare or aged, is aged care within that or is outside of that?
Aged care does sit within that. All aged care residential facilities sit within that.
Okay. So where's that? We're just taping to where aged care fits, please.
It's actually within healthcare, which is there.
It is in healthcare.
Yes,
Okay. All right. Any other question, councillors? Not. Let's move to the next slide.
And that's the sum total of the presentation. Again, focusing on the last 24 months, the recent unemployment numbers, but just giving a broad brush stroke. So in a quick recap and summary, the industry has been impacted in the last 2 years, but the baseline figures say that we are holding together as a broader economy as we go forward. But it very clearly shows that we have some longer term generational issues across our industry and our economy and our broader community that segues very well into the next report coming up with regard to the LEAP project.
Thank you, Mr. Powery. Very, very well put together. Yes, GM?
I wonder, Andrew, at the risk of putting you on notice, on a question without notice, can you speak about the spatial components? What are you experiencing in terms of is proximity to Western Sydney? Are you getting any inquiries there or interest for investment? Or if we talk spatially, what about our main street? How's it performing, and what challenges does it have ahead? Because these are high level figures, aren't they, where cluster the whole sector, perhaps retail even has internet trading in there. But what about in a spatial sense, our main street and industries or relocating from Western Sydney? Any evidence there?
Mr. General Manager, I have had more business investment inquiries in the last 12 months than I had in the previous 3 years. A number of them are looking at the main street. The main street has actually rebounded quite well. If you walk up and down it, you will see less for lease sales signs across the main street. We're getting some good clustering of bespoke and antiques and collectibles on the top end of Main Street, and it generally seems to be ticking on relatively well. A number of the inquiries I have had have been from Western Sydney, Penrith, a restaurateur recently, and another one in the retail space in the last 3 months. So at an ad hoc, localised level, there does seem to be a little bit more of a trend which talks to the increased domestic visitation and the impact. And at Lithgow, as I was the usher for the footpath coming up into the event, there were a number of people who were coming in from Western Sydney who hadn't been to the event before. So yeah, at that spatial level, I think there has been a little bit of a kickstart in terms of our location, primarily predicated by the pandemic, but also the ongoing marketing and positioning of the location that has been happening in the last 18 months based on bushfire money, which means we have been campaigning more into the broader Sydney market.
Okay. No, just your microphone, Councillor.
Sorry, do we get a report on that? Because you're saying that you're getting lots and lots of calls recently in relation to people wanting to come up this way and look at Lithgow as a business area. Is there a way we can get a report on, how many businesses are approaching you each month, or so we know? Because I don't see anything in relation to it'd be good to be able to say to people, we're getting heaps of business inquiries, and we had 20 business inquiries this month for coming up to start a business in our LGA. It'd be good to be able to just promote that. I don't know if that's
The answer is an emphatic yes. I do keep a running register of all inquiries. My advice to council through you, Deputy Mayor, would be that quarterly would probably be an appropriate time to cluster that and come back to the Economic Development Committee with that data.
Yeah, that's something to the committee rather than to the council. That'd be good. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, could I just ask
Yep.
a question? Could we have the first quarter of this year distributed to all the councillors rather than waiting for another Economic Development Committee? Thank you.
You don't need that formally. It's been accepted, I think, that it'll be sent to all councillors. Okay, look, the recommendation is on page 11. Could I get someone to move it, please? Move Councillor Goodwin. Second, Councillor Ring. Those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. And the final item on the agenda is the update on the Liftgo Evolving Economy project. Who wants to deal with this one? Mr. Muir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just speak briefly to this one, summarising the report and some of the activities which we have been involved in recent times in what we call our LEAP project. Firstly, the core component, of course, is funding. We do know now that we have been successful in gaining funding from the New South Wales State Government. We understand that there will be a requirement that Council does make a contribution to that, but we also understand that there will be some recognition for in-kind type of activities. We're hoping to get the first look at the funding agreement tomorrow, so we'll know more after that date. Of course, this is very important. We've been trying to move forward, and we've got things ready to go in terms of getting the tender moving. So, this is a very, very positive step. And I suppose, really, in terms of the question that was asked previously by Councillor Goodwin in relation to jobs and employment, of course, we see this project as being absolutely critical to the future of this area. In the brief that we have written, we've looked to take I suppose, the start of the transition, if you like, and taken that back to those times around about 2014. I think Councillor McAndrew, with the closure of the Lithgow Power Station and the Angus Place Colliery. And what we want to do as part of this project is, I suppose, in some way, not only reclaim jobs, but also build on jobs for the future. Obviously, some big challenges ahead, but we have to, of course, get working on it now. We need to have great respect and protect our current industries. We don't want any of those people that are employed in those current industries to, in any way, shape or form, feeling as though they're abandoned in any way. They must be supported, but we also have to, there's a reality that times are changing, and we have to plan for that. The major piece of work which will be funded will be what we'd probably term a tier one consultancy or group of consultants, high level consultancy with expertise in economics, to take some of the work, for example, the transition working group document, which is very, very good, needs to be taken further, but it needs to be taken into a roadmap with some very tangible actions. One of the things with the brief actually particularly says, one of the things we don't want from this work is just another document. It's got to be more than that. It's got to have a very clear roadmap with what we're going to do to get there. So that'll be the core piece of work to be done. We're hoping to get that kicked off with a pre-tender Zoom meeting, if you will. We're identifying a number of those high-level type consultancies to identify contacts and to get those parties interested in this project, because we think if this is done right, it could also be like, in terms of building the reputation of consultancies, it could be an exemplar work for communities facing this type of issues. So that is up and running, and we're hoping to get out to tender in the not too distant future once we have our funding agreement signed off, and off we go. As part of the work we've been doing, and the strategic reference group which we've formed with a number of very, very generous and I suppose very knowledgeable parties, I mean primarily local, but also from wider afield, particularly people like Greenspot and Talus and Energy Australia and Centennial Coal, Western Sydney University, just to name a few, drop a few names, have been very generous of their time and been very generous in providing input as part of our strategic reference group, who we look at as a sounding board for ideas and feedback. And we've had 2 or 3 meetings now. We've also, as part of that, we're very lucky with our community power project people. They were able to secure a briefing from Dr. Andrew Blakers, or Professor Andrew Blakers, who's a very highly respected expert in renewable energy. Renewables, I suppose we feel in the makeup of the future of Lithgow, renewables is going to be a component. Certainly, we see what we've seen with we've got 2 big battery proposals in the wings. We've got the announcement now that the feasibility study into the pumped hydro, that this will form part of the future. The key question, of course, we're interested in is how does that transfer into jobs and employment. And that's a very, I suppose, a core part of what we want to understand as part of the work that has to be done. We're interested in some of those more specialised members of our reference group forming part of a renewable energy subgroup, so we can sort of, I suppose, look at that in more detail. So that's something that's on the boil as well. We're also looking with one of our experts to have some sort of webcasting sort of festival of ideas, I suppose, which is something which we're very interested in, being able to talk to other areas in transition, not only in Australia but throughout the world. We know of places in our studies and discussions in United Kingdom, in the Netherlands, in Germany, just to name a few, but of course in Australia, some of the communities such as Latrobe Valley. General Manager and I have had some very good discussions of some other areas such as Muswellbrook and Singleton. I'll touch on Muswellbrook in a minute. And there's things to be learned from the way things have been done in other areas, but there's also information to be shared in some of the things we've done as well, particularly our transition working group, which I think is seen of some interest. Muswellbrook, General Manager and myself, who might want to touch on this as well, we've been to Muswellbrook on another occasion now since the last reported to Council. We've delved a bit more deeply into their Upper Hunter Economic Development Board and the use of the funds from their future fund. We've also had contact with Singleton Council, and we're hoping that Muswellbrook will certainly be coming to visit us soon and have a look at some of the things we're doing here. So these sort of collaborations and partnerships we think are going to certainly form part of I suppose, the LEAP process in a way, to get an understanding of what other places are doing. But, the next step is that we'll be doing pre-tender briefings of consultants. Once our funding agreement is signed, we'll be going out to tender. We're looking at probably a project life of 5 to 6 months for this to be done, to be reported back for some form of final adoption of a plan ahead, roughly March next year. So that's where we're at.
So I might Mr. Chairman, I might just compliment what Andrew's added there by. It has been a little bit frustrating. It's been a long period to pursue the funding and set up, an informal strategic reference group. And we're really ambitious now to soon get out to market. We've got a great foundation in the Transition Working Group's document. It's a really powerful piece of work, but we've got to drop that down now into more discrete and real projects with a clarity of an order, an owner and a time frame and the like. But we've been using the period that we have had to build up our network and the intellectual capital that we'll need. And this will be a really difficult task. We have to be really honest with ourselves. We're a city of 23,000. We're not, by comparison, we're not the Illawarra or Wollongong, and we're not the Hunter, where you've got, many more people and a lot more political capital and a lot more experience. So we're going to have to be right at the top of our game. So I'm really pleased, as Andrew's saying, with the strategic reference group that we've been able to bring together. I'm really pleased with some of the advisors that we're using at this point. We are starting to advocate. We're engaging politically and bureaucratically at the state and the federal level to raise a profile about Lithgow. There was a program. I'll just go through a series of things that have been happening because they also will provide foundations and feed into this consultancy work. But we were active. There's a program called Royalties for Rejuvenation, a $25 million program to assist places like Lithgow to diversify their economy. Well, as soon as that was announced, we were making representations that surely Lithgow would be a candidate, and we wanted to be around the table to help shape the guidelines. So we'll continue to prosecute that case. We met with the Mayor and Deputy Mayor with the local health district board, and we said that we want to work with them in defining the most significant role that they could play and what our health sector could look like, working with Notre Dame and the private facilities and the like, as well as the public system. We've got a line of sight through meetings now to telecommunication infrastructure experts inside the state government, and we'd like to now see them step forward and work with us to start to conceive, what are the most important telecommunication infrastructure that we need? What are the kinks in the pipe? What's holding us back from dispersed businesses coming more to Lithgow? We're looking, of course, we're supporting the repurposing of the Wallerawang site with the Green Spot project, but we're also advocating for other sites to be similarly repurposed. We're pleased to see them revegetated when they finish their industrial life, but we're also looking for jobs on those sites. We're working to secure alternative and long-term water security for Lithgow, and that's an important project because we've got security and bulk water. Well, then we've got support for growth and support for industrial development, and we're getting good take-up from the state government in that water security. We weren't determinative, but we worked really hard to activate the Western Sydney University building and the hub, and we were so proud to see them make a major commitment for 3 years, and we've been really active in recruiting staff there with Western Sydney University, and now we'll start to work with them to shape what purposes that hub is put to. We'll be on a steering group there. What else have we been doing? We've been growing our understanding of what they call the national energy market. And if you read a paper or listen to the radio or watch the television, you can't help but hear that there are different forms of energy production that are coming to Australia. And as Andrew said, we think we've got the ability to both continue to provide a long-term substantial power supply and base load, as well as the endowments to play in this new space of new energy. But we need to understand what that looks like, what actual big facilities could be here, such as the pumped hydro or the batteries, but more particularly, we want to look for the jobs behind those. How do you build, an ecosystem of jobs? Batteries are okay, but they're ghost employers. So we're looking for what are the jobs behind there. We're also looking at opportunities in the schools. We need to ensure that the schools are high performing and that we're investing in youth from an early stage. And again, through some of the advisors, we're looking at programs by which we can push, for instance, our secondary schools forward to participate with their peers in research and new learning experiences. And the final point I want to make is that we've been looking at contemporary models of what I can call municipal or local government economic development. And I know the Mayor and Deputy Mayor were quite impressed when they went to Muswellbrook to see the journey that they'd been on. And it had been 4 years. They're just about to stand up an economic development corporation, but over 4 years they've lined up all the ducks and they're ready to go, and they've built what I think is a fantastic model of economic development. And there's no doubt with the new council, we'll have to engage with them and see what their appetite is, because the way we've done economic development in the past and it all, quite frankly, residing in the council may not be the best fit for us. We need some leadership and steerage that can navigate both the civic but also the private sector and the like. So these are some of the things that we've been studying and circling around and pushing whilst we wait for the funds.
Okay, thank you. GM, questions, comments, councillors? Yes, Councillor Goodwin.
I just think for me, Mr. Butler, that everything sounds positive that you've just said. It's good to hear what you've been doing and what the council's been doing over the last few months or a couple of years, and it's looking to be trending in the right direction. I just heard positive stuff out of your mouth, and it was fantastic. It was good.
Well, thanks for that feedback, but I say again that we're going to have to be absolutely right at the top of our game. But
Yep.
I think I'm a bit daunted by the task, but I think we've brought together a good reference group. We've got great advocates, great foundation with the transition working group. And even today we've spoken to Singleton and Muswellbrook, and we've agreed to, in a 3 ways arrangement, share information, share experiences, talk about what they're advocating for, and we've already picked up so many gems from that. And I think that can just go from strength to strength. But none of this will be easy, yeah.
Okay. Questions? Yes, Councillor Goodsall.
Just out of the out of the report, it says it's interesting, despite Lithgow not being included in the state government's renewable energy zone. Why is that?
I wish we knew. The GM can comment on it if he likes, but I know that we've asked the question and I still haven't got a clear answer.
Is that what the General Manager was talking about before?
Some of it was about that, yes.
Look, we don't have the knowledge to know enough about the renewable energy zones and what their construct was, and so there's at least 3, perhaps 4 now. There's the Hunter, the Central West. We're just outside the Central West one, and there's one up around the top of New South Wales as well, around Narromine and the like. But look, we aren't a res. We asked to be included as one, and we continue to work with the government. But notwithstanding, what we've found is that the research suggests, and it seems the private sector is acknowledging this and stepping forward, that Lithgow has many of the endowments. The research suggests that we have the attributes for pumped hydro, for wind, and to a lesser extent solar. We also have proximity to markets, and we have a very sophisticated and unconstrained transmission network for that power. So would we like to be a res? Probably, because we understand that it does bring government support. It sends a strong message to the private sector, but notwithstanding that, the private sector is stepping forward. But I think the interesting thing and what we need to do is we need to expose that potential. We need to market that, but more particularly we need to then attach the jobs and more jobs to these new large power generating facilities, or build downstream jobs. How we do that I don't know yet, but that will be a task for the reference group, and it will be a consideration for this council over the next few meetings of this committee.
Councillor Ring.
One question first. Given the Western Sydney University, how are we going to work with them on this project? Are we going to collaborate with them? Are we going to get them involved? Is there I know there's a desire from them to work on the transitioning of Lithgow. I just like some clarity on how we're going to work with them.
Well, there's probably a couple of points. One is working with them in a sense, involvement on the actual facility and the way the facility's run down there. But the other one is that we've actually, as part of our strategic reference group, engaged with them, and they have a representative actually as part of our strategic reference group, which we saw as very important. And that Dr. Neil Perry, he's actually been involved in work in terms of transitioning economy in some of the Hunter areas as well. So that's probably a couple of examples.
If I may, Councillor McAndrew, look, this is a really important issue, and you've got the strategic reference group, but I think there should be council representation. I think we should have more involvement in what's going forward. This is a strategic development of strategic policy and direction. I think there should be representation on that committee. We should be seeing minutes from the committee. Or we need to be having more frequent economic development meetings to discuss in detail these issues.
It's a good point. Have you got a view, GM?
Mr. Chairman, Deputy Mayor, it's absolutely our commitment. To be honest, we've been distracted with chasing funds and deeds and all these other activities, and we've only had, I think, the one meeting or two of the strategic reference group. One was about a briefing when Andrew Blakers was in the city, and the other was just to bring the group together and get them to speak to their portfolios and what they could bring. So if you like, just a little bit of a team building. As soon as we get the deed and the funds and the consultants, well then the reference group will be more actively engaged in real project sort of leadership, and then we'll be bringing minutes back and information back to this committee. But I'd anticipate that over the next 6 to 9, 12 months, there's going to be a burst of energy, and there'll be a cycle of strategic reference groups to this economic committee, strategic reference group, and then to this economic committee.
Yeah, thank you for that. I still think councillors should be represented on the reference group.
That they're things that certainly I expect the new council will talk about. Look, the report is good, and I don't want to put any dampener on it, but I note once again under the renewable energy, and I quote, becoming clear that renewable energy will form part of the future of Lithgow. The challenge, of course, is understanding and ensuring that there can be a resultant positive impact upon employment. And further on, there is interest from some of the participants in the strategic reference group in setting up a subgroup to specifically look at renewable energy as an opportunity. Now, my knowledge of renewable energy at the moment is that, yeah, it's coming. There's very little long-term jobs. I don't know a lot about pumped hydro. I need to learn a bit about that. But when we look at solar, wind and our batteries, there may be some initial construction jobs, but long-term, there's no long-term jobs. And they're the things that we're looking for in our community, long-term jobs that keep people here, have people working here, keep people here, long-term quality jobs that grow our community. So I'm just saying that's fine, renewables coming, it's here, but we can't put all our eggs in one basket either. We've got to look at other opportunities, manufacturing and other job opportunities as well. Any other comments, councillors, before I put the recommendation? And the recommendation simply that the update on the Lithgow Evolving Economy project be received. I've got a mover. Councillor Goodwin, secondly Councillor Goodsall. Those in favour? Those against? Declare it carried unanimously. Thank you. I think that's it. Thank you all for your attendance, councillors and staff. Thank you.
You don't do any general business?
We haven't got any, have we? I know it's not on the agenda, but on the order of business. But is there any general business that any councillors want to raise? Yes, Councillor Goodsall.
I'd just like to ask, when is this next meeting of the Economic Development Committee? Because this topic to me is bigger than Ben-Hur, and you know, our other committees meet once a month. This is significant, I think, and my understanding is minimal. I was just asking when the next meeting will be.
Mr. Muir's just advised me that the terms of reference suggest 4 or call for 4 meetings a year, but we'll straddle councils, of course, with the election, but I will seek your indulgence because this is a burst of work, and it has to be a tier 1 project for this council. So I would like to suggest that we should be meeting probably each 2 months. That'll allow us enough time in between to do enough work.
Yep.
And the like. Yep.
Okay. All right. Any other matters? If not, thank you all once again, and have a good rest of the night.